Hey there. It's me, Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the comment, thanks. Sunday, July 19th. Last night, I dreamed that I went home. I unpacked all my Annie clothes into a closet and dresser that just contained more Annie clothes. I went to the bathroom, looked in the mirror, admired my long hair, and pulled it back into a ponytail, tying it with a blue ribbon that matched my nails. I sat down to use the pot. There was no external plumbing between my legs. I adjusted my bra and felt the weight of my own breasts move within it. When I left the bathroom, I noticed that my home was now the holding house, and the banner in the living room said, "Welcome back, Sarah and Annie." Sarah was wearing shorts, showing off 2 real legs. Julie was there, too, but she seemed to belong to my parents now. It was as if all this were just an apprenticeship, and I had passed. I was now Annie for good. And in the dream, that seemed okay. I figured all along that I would go to church with my parents today. That's just something our family does. And I was looking forward to seeing Reverend McGrail again. Her first name's Barbara, by the way. Sarah woke up feeling better than usual, so she decided to go, as well. What surprised me was that the Camerons were going, too. I was just trying to be polite when I invited them during Saturday night supper. Of course, I introduced my parents to them as my aunt and uncle, since they might meet Sarah's parents another weekend. Sarah and I rode with Mom and Dad. "I really love that outfit on you, dear," Mom said to me. It was the maroon skirt and white blouse with matching trim that she had brought for me in Fort Russell. Added to it was the maroon hairband and the thin gold chain with a tiny fake ruby in it that day when I had to hide from those visitors from home. My sandals looked fine, but it bothered me a little that I didn't have matching maroon shoes. Then it bothered me that it had bothered me. "Thanks, Mom," I said. "But I don't think I'll wear it to church once we get back to Fort Russell. Hope you don't mind." The church was accessible and the parking close to the sanctuary, so Sarah Beth used her walker. This delighted us all, and especially Reverend McGrail, who remembered that the last time Sarah visited, she was using the wheelchair. We had hugs and introductions all around, as the Camerons had joined us by that time. The sanctuary had a short pew in back to allow space for wheelchairs. Roger insisted that I sit at the end of the pew, near him. His mom just smiled and sat in the pew in front of him. Sarah sat next to me in the pew, and that was a good feeling, too. The Camerons treated us to dinner at one of those shiny chrome and glass diners near the campus. I ordered Mexican. I don't know which I want most, to get back to being a guy again, or to get away from Hope Haven food. "Aunt Fran?" Sarah asked my mom while we were eating. I was glad she preached on Ruth and Naomi today. I always loved that story, and it means more to me now. "Where you go, I will go," the way those two stuck together. It sort of reminds me of me and my sis here. My mom agreed. One thing that I thought about during the sermon is that for some people, tough times drive them apart. Monday, July 20th. All my days are strange, but some are stranger than others. After breakfast, Mrs. Cameron asked me for a favor, a strange favor. "Annie, I am going to ask you something that will sound very strange. You have all the freedom in the world to say no, but please listen what I have to say first." The last time I heard such a line, I ended up living as a girl for 6 weeks. Have you heard of these foundations that grant special wishes to children who are seriously ill or dying? Yes, I said. The kids go to Disneyland or meet a famous baseball player, that sort of thing. Roger isn't doing well, I'm afraid. The doctors don't hold out much hope for a recovery. The chemo and radiation may stop it, but it isn't likely to. He may have a year or a little more. And he has a wish. We would both like you to be a part of it." What was she getting at? Roger is a really nice kid, and I'd be glad to help him if I could. Do you remember Roger saying how sad he was that he didn't have enough nerve to ask that pretty girl back home to go on a date? She asked, staring intently at me. Are you asking me to help arrange a date for Roger? I'm not exactly a social butterfly, but I guess I could help, I said. Actually, Roger and I would like you to go on a date with Roger. A dinner date, actually, a double date with father and me. My mouth dropped open at her suggestion. But I've only known Roger for a few days. And I care for him deeply, but a date? I'm going steady with someone I love very much. Annie, Roger and I both know that you don't have any romantic feelings toward him, but he has a real crush on you. Haven't you seen the way that he always wants to be around you? He hangs on your every word. You're kind to him without being patronizing or frightened of him, and that's so important to him right now. You don't have to even pretend to be romantically interested in him. Just go to a nice dinner with him. It's what he wants more than anything else, just a nice evening out with a girl who is very special to him. A girl who cares for him as a friend, but doesn't love him? I asked. Yes. As I said, he knows that. You don't have to love someone to go on a dinner date and have a nice time. I'm not even asking that you kiss him. Well, maybe a peck on the cheek would be nice, but that's not what this is about. She was pleading. I felt very uncomfortable about this. I wanted to do it for Roger's sake, but I was still a heterosexual guy myself under all this stuff. She went on. If you do this, we will pick up all the expenses. I'll buy you a lovely evening outfit and a wonderful makeover, and of course, you would get to keep everything we would buy for you. I frowned and fiddled with the collar of my pink Snoopy sweatshirt. Sarah and I both came from families that had a tough time making ends meet, and I felt definitely outclassed by the wealthy lady talking to me, not that she was trying to make me uncomfortable. And a new dinner gown and a makeover didn't have that much appeal to me. Oh, I'm sorry, she said. I don't mean to imply that we think you'd do this for what it would get you. No, of course not, I said. I'm sorry. Really, Mrs. Cameron. I do want to help. But I need to think it over, okay? Certainly, dear. I know you won't be here that much longer, so I was thinking that next Saturday would be a good time for the dinner date. If you decide to go, that is. And it would mean so much to all of us. But it is your decision. She patted my hand. I told Sarah about Mrs. Cameron's request as I pushed her to PT. So, what do you want to do? She asked. Which me do you mean? I asked. Annie or Mark? I was honest when I told her that I felt uncomfortable dating anyone when I loved someone else. I couldn't tell her that I was uncomfortable dating a boy because I was a boy. Sarah and I had stopped so we could look at each other. Annie, she said, this is a decision for Annie to make, not Mark. And as the one you love, I give you permission. Go for it. It'll be fun. I said I'd think about it. We were about halfway through PT when a lady came in carrying a tiny baby. All the staff gathered around her, making adoring noises at the baby. I walked over out of curiosity. Kevin introduced us. Pam Willits, Julia, holding here is a new volunteer. She's a healing partner with her sister Sarah, and has been a great help to me with other patients, too. Pam is our assistant PT director. She's away on maternity leave. Pam smiled at me, introduced me to Lori, her baby, and then looked puzzled. Somehow, I think we've already met, haven't we, Julie? Sarah had rolled over by that time. Hi, Pam. I remember you from that family conference we had just before I left the hospital in May. You were a little larger then, she smiled. Julie, you met Pam there. The whole family was there, with Pam representing PT, and my oncologist, and Mrs. Verdugo. That's when they discussed Hope Haven with us. Oh, of course, now I remember. You were pregnant then. I was blonde, I said, framing my wig with both hands. One of my survival skills, women use both hands in the air near their heads while talking about their hair. I guess we both look a little different. Pam smiled and let me hold the little girl. I still have the feeling I've seen you more recently, Pam said, when I handed little Lori back to her. But don't worry. It'll come to me. I was glad Sarah had covered for me, but something about the situation made me nervous. The rest of the day wasn't easy. Sarah felt frustrated at her lack of progress in PT. The prosthetic people hadn't come in yet with the new cosmetic parts to her leg. Chemotherapy made her sick and grumpy. And I agreed to go on a date with a guy. Tuesday, July 21st. This morning, as I was scraping my plate from breakfast, the cook called me. I have Kelly Cassidy on the line. Would you like to talk with her? Sure, I replied. Can you transfer it over to the first floor phone booth? She did. I ran to pick it up on the second ring. Kelly, hi. It's good to hear your voice again. What's up? I had to call to change my appointment for my monthly checkup, she said, and when I was done, I asked them to transfer the call over to the kitchen, to see if anyone I know was eating breakfast, like you. I see that you're still there, and you're still answering to Annie, so the forces of evil must not have caught up with you yet. I laughed. No one's quite as perceptive as you, my friend, and we've learned to be even more careful. It's really good to hear your voice again. Is everything okay? We went on to play catch-up. I told about Sarah's progress, and about Roger Cameron and his mother. Finally, I told her about agreeing to go on a date with him. With Roger Cameron? Wow, she said. If the Cameron Ranch isn't the largest in the state, it's at least second. Annie, these are people who hobnob with senators and representatives, not just in our capital, but in Washington, D.C. They're good people, but they are as rich and powerful as anybody in the state. Now I was starting to get nervous. I knew they were well off, but now I was going to go on a social function with the rich and famous. Annie, Kelly said. I have one piece of advice. Marry Roger. You'll be rich and powerful. What? I yelled. And then more softly, in case anyone walked by, you're forgetting a few things. I don't love Roger, I love Sarah. He doesn't love me, he just has a crush on me. The poor kid probably won't live to marrying age, anyway. And last but not least, I'm a guy. I know that, she teased. If Roger does survive, though, believe me, it would be worthwhile to consider a sex change, if you can get him to marry you. You'd be the richest girl in the state, Sarah could be the richest girl's sister, and Julie could be the richest girl's other sister. You can do this, Annie. By then she was laughing so hysterically that I got laughing, too. Kelly, I laughed. I'll give your ideas all the consideration that they deserve, believe me. I was pleased to hear that she would be coming back to town for a medical evaluation before Sarah and I were scheduled to leave, so we would have a chance to see each other. After I hung up, I rushed upstairs to help Sarah get ready to go to PT. But now I started worrying. If the Camerons, nice as they were that rich and powerful, what would happen to me and my family if they found out that their son's dream date was a guy? Mrs. Cameron took Roger over to PT the same time I took Sarah. With the prosthetics people working with Sarah on attaching the cosmetic portions, the skin, to her leg, and Kevin working with Roger, I sat with Mrs. Cameron and tried to talk her out of the idea. I just wasn't the right type. My social graces were zilch. Surely there must be somebody else that Roger would like to go out with. My dear Annie, Mrs. Cameron laughed. Please don't be frightened. Roger is so excited about this. I haven't seen him so happy since he became ill. Don't worry about social graces or money or anything like that. I was the daughter of a small-town barber when I met Roger Sr. in college, so we're not as different as you think. Just enjoy this, and don't worry about a thing. You are a jewel of a young lady. By the way, speaking of jewels, I hope that we can go shopping this afternoon. Saturday will be here before you know it, and we have things to do. I already asked Sarah if she would like to come, we'll do dinner and everything. She said that if she felt okay, she'd love to. One of the hands from the ranch who is a friend of Roger's will be arriving today, by the way, to help with Roger from time to time. So it'll just be a lovely girls' night out. Oh, my. What will that ranch hand do to me if he finds out that I'm not who everybody thinks I am? By that time, though, the prosthetics guys finished their work, and Sarah called me over to show off her new limb. Actually, it was the old one with a covering, but it looked much better than I thought it might. The skin tone was close enough to Sarah's own, and it did have a soft, skin-like texture. Sarah was delighted, and I was too. Sarah had a brief meeting with her oncologist after lunch, but then the afternoon was free. She felt good enough to come, but the cumulative effects of the chemo made her feel weak enough that we agreed she should come in the wheelchair. We all agreed that from now on, stores that weren't wheelchair accessible weren't worth our attention. I had assumed we would buy something nice off the rack at a department store. Wrong. We went to an exclusive boutique in the affluent part of town. I admitted to everybody that I didn't know much about high fashion, and was glad to let Sarah and Mrs. Cameron share opinions as the clerk held one gown after another up to my chest. Some were way too old in their style. Others would look great on a beautiful woman, but strange on a plain Jane, plain Mark, like me. I was getting a bit bored by it all when Sarah called over from a row of hanging garments. Wait. I think this is it. Mrs. Cameron rushed over, agreed, and brought it to me. I did like the color and the fabric. It was a rich, elegant navy blue gown with a slightly flared skirt, high bodice, and low back. I went back to try it on. Since I really did think it was beautiful, I was disappointed that it didn't fit well. Neither my padded waist or padded breasts were padded enough. That didn't stop the clerk, Mrs. Cameron, or Sarah Beth. Since the dress looked great and its colors flattered me, my next stop was in the lingerie section, where they found undergarments with the appropriate padding built in. The clerk and Mrs. Cameron didn't know that it was to be padding on top of padding, but Sarah came to the changing area with me and helped me make all the necessary adjustments. The gown didn't have a price tag, but I had a hunch that Mrs. Cameron wasn't worrying about that. She left it at the store for alterations. At one point in the dressing area, I whispered to Sarah. She said I could keep the clothing. Will you be able to wear this, or will I have to give it to Julie? I guess it depends on how much I grow, she whispered back. But it's lovely. If I take it up a few inches and I grow a few inches, I can wear it to senior prom. You're a lucky girl, Annie. And maybe Kelly was right, she chuckled. I had told her earlier about the strange conversation. We left the dress there for alterations. The wig shop was next. It was the same one we had visited earlier, except this time we were looking at much more expensive ones than we had seen before, all human hair. Mrs. Cameron said that we didn't have to go with something they had in stock, that they could ship one in by air that would be exactly what I wanted. I was about to say that wasn't necessary, Then I remembered that if I got to keep it, Sarah could wear it. If it isn't too much, I would like one with hair the color of ginger snaps, thick and wavy, and a little longer than shoulder length. I could see Sarah grin as I described her former hair. No problem, the clerk said as she made notes. It will be here by Thursday. And if it isn't right, we can ship in another by Saturday morning, in time for your trip to the beauty parlor. Again, Mrs. Cameron pulled out her plastic. Next came the jewelry store. I was astonished when Mrs. Cameron started picking out jewelry for my evening. She wasn't going for top of the line, but the diamond earrings and necklaces she was examining were a long way from cheap, or even affordable by me. Mrs. Cameron, I'm getting concerned about the cost of all this. I know that you said I would get to keep what you brought, but I just would feel way too guilty keeping any of this. The dress, wig, and undergarments I can understand keeping, because you wouldn't have another use for them, but surely if we buy this jewelry, you can keep that. We'll see, dear, she said with a smile. We agreed upon 3 small diamond studs for the upper holes in my ears, and a small dangling sweep of diamond-encrusted gold for the lower ones. She was looking at diamond necklaces to match when I saw the rings. I had another idea. Mrs. Cameron, would it be all right to get something simpler for my neck, like a single string of pearls, and to get a small solitaire diamond ring like this? I could wear it on my little finger. And if it is possible, I would like to be able to keep it as a reminder of this time. Actually, I had someone else's finger in mind for that ring. I was pleasantly surprised when she agreed. We had supper at a little French cafe and bakery. When Mrs. Cameron left to be with her son, Sarah looked at me again. Maybe Kelly was right. You would make a good wife for Roger. And I could get used to living on a ranch. She was grinning wickedly. Nope, I said, in my best Western accent. Reckon. Have what? Want right here, ma'am, and when we get married, you'll be the one in the white gown. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access. Link in the comment, thanks.